speaker. All right, so our speaker tonight is Lori Meyer. She's a technical communicator in Northern California, where she develops and edits cybersecurity software, documentation, and UI content. She's the immediate past president of the Rochester Chapter, a director at large for the Florida and San Francisco Bay chapters, a past co-manager of the Technical Editing SIG, and a volunteer at large for the Instructional Design and Learning SIG. She also serves as an ad hoc member of the STC Community Affairs Committee, the CAC. She is a candidate for the STC Board of Directors. I think I can say that, right? I hope I can say that.
Yeah, you can say it, yeah.
I said it anyway, so there you go. Lori has received Distinguished Community Service Awards from 6 different STC communities, President's Awards from 3 chapters, and a Spotlight Award from the Florida chapter. In 2015, STC named Lori an STC Fellow. And her talk tonight is about editing skills and communication. Editing skills play an essential role in quality technical communication. However, even the most skilled editors need to communicate professionally and effectively with writers. Lori will discuss how effective communication with colleagues and clients is an enduring principle that helps editors enhance team communication, improve documentation, and provide writers with valuable insights to strengthen their writing. Okay, Lori, take it away.
Okay, thanks. Just quick check. You can still all hear me, right?
Yep.
Okay, good. Well, this presentation is called The Editor as Collaborator because collaboration is such an important concept when you're working between writer and editor. So that's the golden thread that's going to be emphasized throughout the presentation. So what we're going to cover essentially why good communication is important, some of the perceptions that we often encounter of the editor's role that might cause communication challenges, some common communication challenges that editors face as they receive documents and are trying to figure out, how to handle a particular editing project, and guidelines for enhancing positive communication while working with authors to improve quality. And positive communication doesn't mean that you don't, honestly confront the author with any problems in their work, but you do it in a constructive way. So we'll take a look at that. So communication is important for a number of reasons. First of all, it promotes teamwork. It promotes the feeling that we're all in this together. It helps authors be more open to your suggestion, and it helps reduce repeated errors going forward, because if there's good listening on both sides, the authors will learn from you, you'll learn from them, and your communication and the lessons that you learn together will last. It allows more focus on the value that you can provide, because if you communicate positively, professionally, and effectively with your authors, you will be perceived as someone who brings value to the work that you do. And it opens the door to additional editing opportunities, because if you're seen as someone who is good to work with, that people can learn from, then people will be more attracted to what services you can provide, whether it's internally in a company or whether you're doing editing as a consultant or a freelancer. So let's take a look at some perceptions of editor. Sometimes when people hear about editors or they hear the word editing, they do have some perceptions that may not be entirely flattering to the field. A lot of times, the reason I put this angry blue pencil here is because, sometimes the editor is seen as someone who is grumpy. In fact, I've heard people say, I'm the grumpy editor. I'm the grumpy grammarian. And it's like, I want to beg these people, do not use the G word when you're talking about yourself, because grumpy does not make you a better editor. It does not make you a stronger editor. It certainly doesn't make you someone that people want to listen to. So, I I just really kind of cringe when I hear people talking about themselves as, oh, the grumpy editor or whatever. Sometimes editors are perceived as being focused on unimportant details. And we talked about this earlier tonight when we got together, where some people just feel that why all this emphasis on grammar and usage, we're talking about content, but grammar and usage are part of strong content. So, it's unfortunate that this perception kind of lingers. Editors are sometimes perceived as separate, us versus them. The writer writes something and the editor, their job is to take a pencil and rip it up and hack it up. But that's not necessarily true. Yes, there is a level of editing called developmental editing that might involve significant rewrites, but that's not something that the editor does in a spirit of going on the warpath. It's all about making sure that the content is the best it can be for the target audience. It's clear, concise, not misleading, and works for the target audience. So what are some of the challenges that editors face when they're working with different types of work, different quality levels, different conditions? And the reason that I put this picture up is that sometimes it can be extremely frustrating when you're working under obstacles that you don't know how to get through. So for example, it's good for every editor to kind of filter the challenges through their own experience. For example, how do you as an editor respond to unclear content? How do you respond to missing information? How do you respond to major problems with organization, flow, or quality of writing? Now, all of these challenges are frustrating, but it's important that you understand where your hot buttons are, because if you can understand that, then you can work on constructive ways to work through every one of these challenges in a professional and positive way. How to respond to content delivered behind schedule, and that's a big problem, especially in tech. How do you respond when you're restricted to proofreading or light editing when the content clearly needs more work? And that's a big frustration. I have been told sometimes when I've been given a job to edit, okay, now I don't want you to spend more than 20 minutes on this. I don't want you to go messing with the wording. Just proofread. And it's very clear that this piece needs a lot more than that. So what do you do in a situation like that? So communication can make the difference in working through these obstacles. They often can't be resolved 100%, but you can go a long way in reducing your own frustration and just helping people to understand the nature of your work. Even if you can only make a small inroad, that's better than nothing, that's for sure. So let's see why it makes the difference. First of all, you need to see your edits as teamwork. You're not separate. You're just doing a different piece of the same work. Your objective is the same: clear, concise, appropriate text. And you want that as much as the writer does. So it's important to zero in right on the document, see it as a product of the team's effort. It's not necessarily something that is one person's as opposed to another. In a corporate environment, you really, everything belongs to everyone essentially. So you have to look beyond you and the author alone, because this is not just about the two of you. It's about content that is going to be part of something bigger than both of yourselves. Get to know your team members, not just the individual authors that you're working with, but the entire team. For example, if you work with a team of maybe half a dozen writers, it's good to know all of them, get to know their manager, just kind of figure out the flow of the team and how they work together, and kind of get to know the variances among the team. because that will help you to know how to respond to each of the team members and yet offer a common, at least a common enough approach to each team member. You know, some members of the team would prefer maybe a maybe a one-on-one chat with you or a review meeting. Others would just prefer, you know, just more of a, you know, a quick edit and then maybe a follow-up later. But, you know, there are all different types of ways that people like to work with editors. So it's important to get to know that. Um, it's important to clarify the expectations regarding the extent of editing before you set that blue pencil down against the paper, because if you know the expectations, you'll save a ton of time and frustration. Even if those expectations can be frustrating and there may be nothing you can do about it. On the other hand, there may be ways that you can offer, even if you're very limited, if the time limits you, you know, there may be ways that you can say, I know we can't do much with this particular version, but there may be some things that we can do together if there's more time later on, or maybe in the next release. Describe to the author how you work and the approach you took to edit the content. So actually, this might be a good thing to do even before you start editing with someone, especially with someone you haven't worked with before. But you might just like to say, you know, the first thing I do is, you know, I do a quick read or I do a, you know, scan of the headings, and then I kind of go into things. I look at the text and then I try to establish the relationship between the text and the graphics and figure out how that fits in. So just, you know, just things like that. Um, Now, I still do a lot of editing with pencil and paper, for example, because I do peer reviews for a couple of our colleagues in India. And I edit online if I don't have a lot of time, but I've often found that I can actually do a more thorough edit if I just print the thing out and edit in pencil. Always in pencil, never with a pen, because I do tend to use erasers a lot. So, you know, you'll have your own style and it's helpful for the author to know how you approach it. It's also critical, note the good as well as the bad, because it communicates that your focus is on quality, not just catching errors. So you're not just sitting there, oh, let's see what I can find here. What can I catch? No, it's like, what's good about this document and what can I do to encourage the author to keep doing that and more of it? So that's what you want to do. You want to tell them what they did was good. And if there's something that you learned, for example, if there was some way that they described an illustration that you found insightful, say, I really like the way you did this. You know, I never thought of this before. So you can learn from your author as well as they can learn from you. So, you know, it's a mutual learning experience, which is all to the good. And offer to meet with your author one-on-one to discuss major editing issues. So if you're started on a document and you're finding that this is a little more serious than I thought it was, you know, just say, you know, I just want to have a quick chat with you because there's a section here that looks like there may be some areas where it's kind of not following the logic of the way you're describing the product. So I just want to figure out if there's some way that we can work on this together. So it's always important to query with an open mind. It's inevitable with every document pretty much that there are going to be things you don't understand. And some things are going to be a total mystery. I mean, I work in a very complex environment of enterprise level cybersecurity software. And there's some stuff that I look at and it's like, oh, wow, where do I start with this? But, you know, I have to check myself because I want to make sure that the understanding or the lack of understanding I have is maybe my lack of knowledge, maybe exposure to new information, as opposed to something that the writer just didn't write very well. So I have to make that distinction. But even if there is something that's just, you know, so badly written that it's just, you know, doesn't make sense at all, it's important to query, just, do a test of your own understanding and tell the writer, you know, this definitely needs clarification because I think there's important, information here, but the customer could be easily confused and we want to work through that. So, um, can you tell me a little bit more about this? And then maybe we can figure out how to put the right words together to make it make sense. And when I do that, the writers are a lot more receptive to helping me, and it helps me reduce the number of times I have to ask them, because if I'm impatient or rushed or talk down to them, they're going to give me unclear answers, and I'm going to have to go back, and then that kind of puts a strain on things. So it's important to just focus on understanding. And that means also avoiding a finger pointing question style that might put your author on the defensive. We've known editors where they get in grumpy mode and they might say, "What is this? This is unclear." I mean, I had an editor put the big word unclear in the margin of one of my documents, and it's like, this does not help me. Yes, I want to clarify it, but I don't know where to start. And I can feel the editor's anger. It's like, this is not helping. So it's important to make sure that your questioning style is truly a questioning, querying style in a positive way that communicates your desire for a positive outcome. And you also have to consider that what doesn't make sense to you could be a product or a UI issue. So you need to work with your authors to find the best wording solution, because sometimes you might assume that you think you understand what needs to be corrected. You'll make the correction and you introduced an error. And I have done that myself. So there may be, just product issues. You might have gone to the product manager and said, "Could you clarify this for me? This doesn't look correct to me." And they'll say, "Yeah, that's the way it is." Or there might be a UI, like, a field label or an error message that you don't think makes sense. And for one reason or another, maybe it's a deadline or, lack of resources, says we can't fix it now. So you may have to, use the documentation or the release notes to kind of massage things a little bit to make it clear until that issue can be resolved. Now, one of the things that I'm working on more now than I did maybe 2 years ago is I am working more on the UI now, and helping the designers write better error messages, helping them to identify field labels that may be misleading or incorrect. And I'm finding that very gratifying, and my editing history has been invaluable in helping me to persuade the development manager that this is something I can help with. And now I'm really gratified that some of these developers are voluntarily coming to me and asking me to check their messages. So I'm really glad that, you know, I was able to build a good relationship with them and help them in this new and interesting way. And it's important to be mindful of how you're responding as you edit. And this goes back to, the challenges I talked about. How do you respond to these different conditions? So it's important to consider the circumstances under which a draft was written, because it could be that the deadline was nearly impossible. There was a sudden last minute change in the project scope. The developers didn't get the input they needed, whether it was from marketing or product management, had trouble finding out what, some customer requirements were. So all of this might have contributed to some of the content and writing errors. And the deadlines themselves are really, that's something that has dogged all of us, because when you're on an extremely tight deadline, when the writer is working on something that they just, have to stay up till 2 a.m. for the last 3 nights, and they did the very best they could, that's just something to kind of keep in mind. And even if it causes you a little extra work, being having some empathy with that will go a long way in preserving your relationship. So wherever you can, look for ways to convert frustration into effective communication. Now, some of the things that I do, I have often felt very frustrated with text that just, it just isn't well done for whatever reason. So I will just try to when nobody's around and I'm sure nobody can hear me, I'll just say, "Oh man, this is bad." But I would never in a million years say that to anybody else or to my author. But once I've gotten that out of my system, I can start turning that into something constructive and say, well, these are some problems I identified. Here's number 1, 2, and 3. So maybe we can work together on these. Here are some suggestions I've got. And if there's something, else you want to tell me about, give me some background, then we can consider that and work through this stuff. So this leads into always keeping your feedback constructive. It's really important when you come up with a problem, always try to suggest an alternative, alternative wording, alternative phrasing, and be sure to offer reasons for your suggestion. I think this phrase would be clearer because it really more strongly identifies this particular situation, and I think this would work. So here's my suggested rewrite. And if the writer can see that and that you did it in good faith and that you want to help them be a better author, then that will certainly make a difference. And if you're a writer yourself, think about what your experience has been from people who have reviewed your documentation. Think about the good things and the bad things that you've noticed when your work has been reviewed. If someone has been really good and helpful and constructive, that they've been a good teacher to you, think of what those things were and build them into your own editing practices. And at the same time, if there are things that frustrated you to death, like one of the things that just drives me crazy, and this is probably true for a lot of us, when someone doesn't understand something I wrote, they circle it, they put a big question mark in the margin with no explanation. It's like, what do I do with this? Nothing. I don't know what this means. All I know is that they don't get it, and maybe it is unclear. Maybe it's wrong, but I don't know. I need help from my editor. So that's the sort of thing that if you have memories of that, you can look at that and say, what can I do to avoid, that kind of stressful type of feedback that really doesn't help anybody. So another thing you can do is to educate your authors, your team, the people who manage your team, whether you work for an editing manager or a writing manager, you can educate all of these people. You can offer to do presentations or webinars or workshops based on the skills that you have. You can let your authors know what resources you use and why you use them. For example, I use the Oxford American Dictionary. I use the Chicago Manual of Style because that's a very common standard. And I use the Microsoft Manual for Technical Publications, which is a very commonly used resource. And our development team is comfortable with my using those. They don't care much about the Chicago Manual of Style, but it is helpful for publication-oriented questions that come up. Like, none of the developers I know anything about copyrights, but books like Chicago can be helpful resources for that. Plus, it helps you when you do have an argument for changing something. You can cite these resources and feel like you're, on a more authoritative ground. And if you have a resource library and somebody wants to take a peek at it, you'll share them. And help your authors understand your organization's styles and standards, especially in regulatory environments like maybe medicine or life sciences, other things, oil and gas, even government, military. I mean, some of these organizations have extremely rigid standards that cannot be deviated from too well. So it's important that your authors understand that. And if there are certain style guidelines that absolutely must be followed, no exceptions, that may limit your ability to offer different types of writing styles as alternatives. But if your authors understand that, they will be far more willing to accept, you know, any corrections that you make that are based on those standards. So it's very important for you as an editor to know what those standards are, to have access to them on your desk, and to help your authors know what they are as well, because that will cut down on the number of, perceptions that this is just all my opinion. So, you can stand more on authority that way. I wanted to share an STC special interest group that people who want to know about editing might be interested in poking around. It's the Technical Editing Special Interest Group, and it's been around for several years. It's a good place to meet technical editors in STC. It's a good place to learn more about technical editing. They have online programs regularly every year, and it's all online. They have a great online newsletter. So if you go to this website here, there's a link over at the left to their newsletter called Corrigo. And the editor of this newsletter is also the manager of the Technical Editing SIG, Yoel Strimling. He's a great editor, very knowledgeable. He's based in Israel. He's done some outstanding presentations. And so he writes great stuff for this newsletter. So that might be worth checking out. If you're an STC member, you can join this SIG at any time. I think it's $15 now to join a SIG. But if you're an STC Gold member, you get in for free. So if you haven't renewed your STC membership and you're a Gold member, you can just add this one right onto your membership. Won't cost you a nickel. I've been a member. In fact, I was co-manager of the Technical Editing SIG many, many years ago. So just as kind of a final, reflection on what good editing is, Bonami, if you don't know what it is, it's a gentle abrasive cleanser made of all natural material, no harmful chemicals. It's good for cleaning things like Corningware and other porcelain fragile dishes. Their term is clean without scratching, and they use this baby chick. They've been around for 100 years, and I've always loved this. Hasn't scratched yet, because I like to feel that I have done all of my editing in a way that is helpful to the authors, that provides just enough tiny abrasive to help them improve their copy, but I haven't scratched yet. So I want to end on sort of a humorous note there. If you're frustrated with editing, you might want to do a Google search on funny signs or something like that. Here's a couple that gave me a chuckle. Some things are temporarily close and others are temporarily far away. So you never know. And also, it's a good idea to watch out for the risk of buglers in your area, and contact your local police for buglery prevention advice. So I always get a big kick out of this. So these sometimes will bring a smile to my face. And I have a whole collection of really funny signs with goofy typos that make me smile. So that's the essence of my presentation. I am at meyer.communications@gmail.com. And you can contact me there. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. If you'd like to follow me on Twitter, I am LRMeyer747, and I'll put all this in the chat. So that's the formal part of my presentation. So if you want to have questions or discussion, ask away. Thank you. I'm going to stop sharing now, but let's see. So I'll bring us, all of us, our happy faces back here, and I will put my contact information in the chat. So I'm open for comments, questions, anything.
I
Is
have
it
a
always?
question. Oops.
Sure.
May I, Richard?
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Do many places still hire a separate technical editor to go over the documents? Is that still common?
It's not, it does exist, but those positions are not as common as they used to be. Unfortunately, what tends to happen sometimes is that technical editors, if there is a staff reduction in the technical communication staff, I'm sad to say that editors would probably be the first to be laid off. But there are organizations that do still hire, usually they're large organizations, probably global multinational corporations might have editors. Now there's a lot of opportunity for, editors who want to do freelance consulting. In fact, there's actually a site called Editorial Freelancers Association, and that's a group of people that actually are freelance editors as a career. And it's I'm just learning about it now, but I'll try to remember to put it in the chat here. I think it's http://the-efa.org. But that might be, if you're interested in learning about what editors do as a profession, that might be something good to check out. Now, what happens is, oh, sorry.
That's not free, by the way. The EFA is.
No, it is. It's not free. It's a membership organization. So, but they do have a website. You can, there are some things you can pull out of it, and sometimes they do offer non-members admission to their events. You might have to pay a little bit more, but yeah, it definitely is not a free organization. But if you're serious about a freelance editing career, it might be worth checking out. In organizations that do have editors, what's typically been happening is that often it's a writer who kind of combines editing into their job. That's what I've been doing for many, many years. I was principally a writer. That's been my title. But if they're looking for somebody to edit between assignments, I'm usually the one that they ask, because I started my career actually as a professional technical editor. That was my title. And unfortunately, I was laid off. And it was the last technical editing position that I ever had. But I never forgot it. I loved editing, and I still do. And I'm also finding now that as I'm working more into this editing of UI content, that's becoming an area where technical writers can serve as, content consultants and editors. And even though there's no position that I know of called UX editor, but it's something that where a writer can definitely add value. So that's exciting to me. And I can take everything I've learned as an editor over the years and apply that to helping developers write good messages, good field labels, good, embedded help. So that's a good opportunity that's becoming more common.
Thank you. And thank you for the presentation.
Oh, you're entirely welcome. It was a pleasure.
So is it always that convivial and non-combative?
Oh, is what non-combative?
Your relationships with writers, is it always convivial and collaborative and not combative?
Well, for me, it hasn't been combative. It's often been like when I had my first technical editing position, for example, there was a a matter of having to build trust, because a lot of the writers that were producing, it was for a telecommunications firm, and a lot of them didn't know why they had to have their stuff edited. And our team was structured so that every document had to go through an editor. And a lot of writers, they kind of went along with it because that was the process, that was the policy, it was required. But they didn't really know if an editor could really understand the copy because it was a complicated telecom product. And so we had to kind of build up trust. And so I found that one of the things I wanted to do was try to build a relationship with these writers first. Help convince them that I was approachable. I was not, a grumpy editor. I was there to help them. It was a team effort. So when I got my first editing assignments, it was a little bit nerve-wracking for me, but I went through and I did an edit, my very first edit. So I thought, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through this, I'm going to mark it, and then I'm going to meet with the writer and just tell them, because it's our first experience, I'm going to tell them what I did, why I did it, and how I work. And the writer kind of teased me because I used multiple colored pens to do the edit. I did red to make the corrections. I did green to put comments in the margins, and I used blue to comment on the graphics. And our manager got kind of a kick out of that, and the writer kind of laughed about it too, but it was a positive, good humored situation. But when we got through our discussion, when I went through the whole document with him, he said, "You're the first editor that has actually sat down with me and explained your edits." And I was very gratified to hear that. Now other writers were the grumpy ones. And sometimes it was hard for me to deal with that, but I didn't want to return grumpiness with grumpiness. I tried everything I could to stay positive, and I didn't want to get into battle with anybody. I tried to pick my battles. And if there was something that I knew that just definitely needed to be corrected, I tried to back it up with as much authority as I could. But other things I did have to let go because it just wasn't worth fighting about.
I have a question, and
Sure.
thank you, Lori, for your presentation. As you were talking with Tony and responding to her question about, there aren't a lot of pure editors in a lot
Right.
of firms, and especially in a small, I have a fairly small tech writing group.
Yeah.
And we've tried to do peer editing, and I'm interested in reviving our peer editing program. But so I'm wondering if you have any tips or, best practices for that, because it always seems to me there's people who are good editors and who enjoy editing.
Yes.
And we've always had but they get all the work. So I'm
Oh,
also
okay.
curious too, like how you cultivate, kind of a small cadre of editors in an organization, and any thoughts you have on that?
Well, that's a great question because peer reviewing is really valuable on any team, because it's very hard for a writer to see beyond their own words. So one way to maybe sell the idea of peer reviewing is just to sell the value of having someone else look at your work, have another pair of eyes on it, because no matter what level they are as far as their actual editing skills or how much of a grammatical expert they might be, just having another pair of eyes look at it is very valuable, because it's amazing what that other pair of eyes can see that the writer cannot see. And Nikki, did you want to say something?
Keep, because I have something to say on that subject, but finish what you were saying.
Oh, okay. So just to introduce the concept of peer editing, that may be one way to kind of open the door to that. And then, maybe in talking one-on-one with writers, if there's some way you could draw out any level of interest in doing that a a little more often than some others might want to do. So if someone said to me, for example, we'd like to get somebody that really likes to do peer reviewing, I'd raise my hand because I've been doing that for many, many years, and I find it valuable. So I think if it's seen as something that, maybe just looking at something, that the writer never would have considered with another pair of eyes on it, that's one thing. And then, if someone really and truly feels gratification out of doing peer reviewing, that will, make them excellent for that role. And I know the only challenge is that maybe somebody, if you're known as a good peer reviewer, somebody will, you'll have people come to you, oh, can you please do this? And so you might have to figure out, I can't keep saying yes to all these requests. So you may need to work with your team or a manager, whoever is kind of in charge, and figure out how to balance the workload and put some conditions on when, when a peer review can be done and under what conditions, things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I think the group is sold on the value of editing. It's just, finding the time and again,
Yes.
cultivating, getting, sort of training and training more editors and training more
Yeah.
people on the team to be good at editing. And, as always, making the time for that.
Yeah,
is another
that's the
challenge.
tough part. Now, do you have people that have expressed interest in stepping up to a role like this?
Yeah,
Or
a couple people, but not
okay.
enough. But not enough.
Not
Yeah.
enough.
I was
Okay.
I was even wondering too, just, and again, because I love what you said, and I think this is so true, that editing, like, it builds trust and it builds teamwork, which is
Yes.
wonderful. So I was even wondering, we've got some more experienced writers and some newer writers on the team. I was wondering if even, we could, some of those newer writers could be, could be copy editors, and as they're learning our style guide, they could do that kind of level of edit, and then the more experienced writers might be able to do developmental and other types of edits.
Yeah, that's possible. I think it's a matter of like figuring out what people are interested in doing, how it fits into their workload, because some people may feel entirely comfortable just copy editing, while others might feel a little bit more, comfortable with more in depth. So it's kind of a matter of kind of taking the temperature of who's interested, and maybe trying to figure out how, if there's some way you can provide evidence of, because we have these peer reviewers, this is the benefit that we gain from this. This is how it's improving our quality, and that might help sell the idea. And
Yeah.
maybe some writers might think, wow, well, if I can help, add on to the quality, count me in, type
Right.
of
I
thing.
think, I think it's a matter of, like, as you said, if the editing is working and it's seen as valuable, more people might be interested in doing it too, potentially.
Absolutely. Yeah. If they can see the value. Thank you. That's great question. Nikki.
Make a comment on that I heard, I think it was Lori Fisher say at an STC conference to writers. She said, you should always be your own first editor, but you
Yeah.
should never be your own last editor. Another way of, very concise way of saying that it needs a second look, as you were saying before,
Oh yeah, absolutely. And
I mean, that's a very concise way of stating it. That's what I thought that really impressed me. Was I think she's an STC fellow, and
oh yeah, and she actually is right. Even, even though you might need another peer reviewer to see things you can't see, one thing that I found helpful sometimes is I'll draft something, and if I have time, if the deadline allows it, I'll just put it aside and look at it either several hours or the next day later. And I'm amazed at how many things that I can think of to change just by taking my eyes off it for a while and coming back. And, so that has the benefit, but also it's just a professional thing to do, to do everything you can to make sure that your copy is as good a shape as it can be before you give it to an editor or peer reviewer. That's that's just fair and professional to do. So I agree with that. Yeah.
What I found usually works on my with my editing. I have very good relationships with the editors that I have. At the primarily with the STC and the journal, but usually what I find is that what I use an editor for is to spot stuff that needs attention, and then usually I wind up. Sometimes it's a really quick fix. They put in a comma or something that needed there, and I accept that. But other times, what's really valuable to me is just noticing a place where something needs to be looked at, and then I look at it and then make my own decision about the fix.
Yeah. That's true. And another part of that also is I have found that if I encourage writers to let me know if there's anything special that they want me to focus on, if they're worried about some part of the text that they just don't feel as confident about as maybe some other parts. And when I ask for my work to be looked at, sometimes I'll say, I'm really concerned that I've left something out here, that maybe I've got all the steps, but maybe some of them aren't as detailed as they need to be. So please look at the section, whatever, because that's the one that I had the most struggle with. So if you could take a close look at that one, I'd appreciate it. So, that sort of dialogue, once you build some trust, that sort of dialogue will emerge, and you can work well between you.
If there's time, I have a little feel-good story about an experience that just came to mind listening to Lori.
Sure.
Is that okay?
Have at it.
I was a tech comm manager at a small transfusion medicine company, and lots of documents would come through my departments. And there was one young scientist in particular who just could not write. She was great in the lab. She was a lab rat, as we used to call them, but she just couldn't write. And she had two different managers who were constantly writing her about, harassing her about her work, her writing, saying it's really bad and you got to do something about this. So she came and talked to me and asked me, she said, for a personal goal for her manager, she was thinking of going through one of these shortened certificate programs. I think she looked into UC Berkeley, and then there was another one that was less expensive since the company was to pay for it. And she asked if I would mentor her through the class. And I was so overwhelmed with my workload, but I said, absolutely, I would love to. To tell you the truth, I used to schedule about an hour at a time, one-on-one with her, to go through her lab protocols to say, what are you trying to say here? And I just loved that time I spent with her. So anyway, I did that. It was an entire semester, maybe even 2 semesters. And she would show me her teacher's comments, and they were wonderful. And she could not
great.
That she made it through that. I mean, she was practically close to tears when she got her certification.
Oh, wow.
And she fulfilled her goal. And then she gave me a gift certificate to get to massage therapist. Which
oh
was
my
really
gosh.
Lovely. And
after that,
shortly after I left that company and started interviewing at other companies, and I asked her if she would be one of my references, because these days I would need up to 6 references. And she was my reference for the job, 2 of the last jobs that I had. And so that just shows you how, I mean, I don't know what I'm trying to say, but the reciprocity of it. I mean, it made me feel so good. I felt like I was, inspiring her by the questions that I would ask her, and the way I made her sort of look at things, look at her writing, and what is she trying to say. So that was one of my very, very happy stories, and the fact that she would happily go out of her way to be a reference for me.
Well, that's a great story, and what a happy ending. And here's where building a strong relationship with good communication, worked for a really great outcome. I mean, she built communication skills, written communication skills with your help. and she succeeded. So that's terrific. Great story.
Lovely. And then I also just wanted to ask the group if anybody remembers Vicky Mackey. Does that name
Of
sound
course,
familiar?
of
Yeah.
course, very well.
And she had passed away. She had been one of my teachers at UC Berkeley probably 20 years ago, teaching me tech editing. And she was one of the first people that showed me how to look at documents.
Mhm.
I remember one of the exercises was to go on the Lawrence Livermore's website and download a published report and have all of us in the class edit the report and then share the way we edited the report. And we all just kind of tore apart those those published reports. And it was
Yeah.
fascinating. So yeah, I just wanted to bring her up again. I haven't thought about her for years, but listening to you, Lori, tonight brought back memories of Vicky. So that's it.
That's great. Yeah.
She
Great
was
stories.
Vic
Thanks
was
for sharing.
of the Berkeley chapter at one point.
Yeah. She and her
Okay.
husband- Yeah, I think she and her husband were both members of the Berkeley chapter.
Okay. Now, did you say that she passed away or?
She did,
Oh,
yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah, 10,
sorry to
10 years ago, quite a while.
Okay.
I
Very
think she
young.
got
That's
cancer, I
sad.
think it was. I'm not sure.
Because her name was familiar to me. I might have even met her, but
She
wow.
was also the main force behind the NorCal group when that existed.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
All right, I think at this point, unless Nikki has something she wants to have on the recording, I'm gonna stop the recording. Nikki, did you have something you wanted to say for posterity?
Me? No, just thank you. Let's just have a great hand for our wonderful speaker tonight and all the wonderful questions that people ask.
Yeah, thanks for your great questions. Really good discussion.
It was a wonderful presentation, Lori. And
Thank you.
I remember your bon ami from the last time I heard you speak a long time ago.
I
Your
didn't
trademark.
realize I had forgotten I had kept it in there. But
Very nice.
but yeah, I love their branding. And it just seemed like the perfect product metaphor. So I'm glad you enjoyed it. And thank you all for coming. It's been a pleasure to present to you tonight. And thank you for the great discussion and all the great questions. And so I put my contact information in the chat. And let's see, is there I can hang around for a little while longer, but if you want to wrap it up, Richard, that's fine too. Whatever you guys want to do.
I'm going to wrap up the recording, but we can still stay around and chat if we want. I don't have to show you one of our coveted chapter mugs, but definitely we will present you with one. I'll have to get your address and have it shipped to you properly. But we unfortunately we don't have our we've had a change of programs manager, and the new programs manager isn't here to present it to you, and I don't have one to me, but
That's all right.
happen.
Yeah,
Of course, we could just mug for the camera here.
Yeah, we could just mug for the camera. Very good. I'm going to turn off the
I'll send you my address. And